It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you all for being here. I'm very happy to be part of all of this and excited about where we're going to go. So this talk is going to introduce the Land Arts program, which we've gotten bits and pieces of before. I'm going to try to lay out the framework for the pedagogy and demonstrate the belief that the Land Arts program is a work that produces other work. We're going to move pretty fast and cover a lot of ground, so please fasten your seatbelts. So we begin with Buckminster Fuller. Not until I was 4 years old, in 1899, was it discovered that my cross-eyedness was caused by my being abnormally farsighted. Lenses fully corrected my vision. Despite my new ability to apprehend details, my childhood's spontaneous dependence only upon big patterns has persisted. We still have a lot to learn from Bucky reading big patterns. As I trust all of us know, spiral jetty is not a picture. It's certainly not static. Or stable. It's a condition. A lens focusing our attention to larger frameworks, to what is around, like the very near oil exploration jetty to the south, and its traces of industrial production and failure. To presence and absence. Ultimately, however, it's about material, about rocks, salt, water. And it's about a walk, an experience. This brings to mind the writing of the architect Johanni Pallasmaa and his clear distinction between the image of a door and the act of passing through it. Or put it yet another way, in the words of the late great Townes Van Zandt, you cannot count the miles until you feel them. So Land Arts is essentially a semester abroad in our own backyard. We use the pedagogic value of travel and field work to investigate the landscape of the Americas. The world is our classroom, and our journey through it is a vital part of our conversation. Occupying the continuum of human intervention in the land, we connect pre-contact settlements with contemporary earthworks, some existing as faint traces. Other works we visit we're not allowed to photograph, but you can draw. We encounter scientific research installations, military and industrial land use, but most importantly, we connect this experience through our work, creating no-trace interventions that operate within the particular landscapes we inhabit. Paying attention to what is out there is a full-body experience, for some much more so than others. To help us negotiate the multivalent meaning of these places and shed some light on strategies to aid their comprehension, we invite the wisdom of field guests, writers, makers, interpreters, to join specific portions of our journey. People like the art historian Ann Reynolds, artist Joan Jonas, Center for Land Use Interpretation Director Matt Coolidge, SIMPARC member Steve Badgett, writers Lucy Lepard, Charles Bowden, and Barry Lopez have joined us, as have Adobe Alliance founder Simone Swan, artist Deborah Stratman, filmmaker Sam Douglas, repellent fence maker, I wasn't lying about his big beard, artist Zoe Leonard, architect Uwe Flugkiger, fellow Swiss. The post-commodity members Cade Twist and Raymond Chacon have also joined us, and this is just a little sampling of our field guests. Impelled by the logic of survival, we become a community in the field. Our social and work life are connected by the places we inhabit, and these places are never static. The shape of our interaction takes many forms and brings us to all sorts of places, revealing all sorts of traces. We are as captivated by the big gulp cup, the drink cup there, as the cow skull. The traces of human action we encounter run from minor to crickets. Is it the takeout? Okay. So the traces of human action we encounter run from minor to major. That sticker on the Trinity Site sign, Trinity Site is where the first atomic explosion occurred, contains a Howard Zinn quote that reads, "There is no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people." Sometimes you have to wonder if all the traces we encounter are real. Yet as Michael Gitlin said in the film The Bird People, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Knowledge takes many forms. Ultimately, land arts is about time and space, and about the nature of a journey, complete with the reality of what it means to live on the road, including all of its obstacles. I like to think of obstacles as opportunities. Wait. It needs, the sound is not working.
One more.
Go!
Of sticks and might, and then Chris Taylor's about to blow through this and see if he cannot get stuck. So this is the third and final man.
So it's not a competition, and sometimes we have to call for backup. Coolidge was nice enough to meet us out on the flats one day with this mudcat for a very expensive rescue. There's a difference between traveling down the highway at 80 miles an hour with the AC on and the music up, to meandering down backcountry roads, to jostling down roads that you have to stop and repair from time to time. Pulling us down these roads and into the field are the historic earthworks, such as Michael Heizer's Double Negative, which can be difficult to see until you're upon it. In 1969, Michael Heizer makes this sculpture out of space, out of void. It's a work to be entered. He likes to make the distinction between size and scale. Size being how big something is relative to the world, and scale being how big something is relative to your perception. Measuring from north to south comes in around 1,400 feet, similar in height to the Empire State Building. While there is much criticism of the machismo of Heizer's gesture, I believe it's a stronger work today because of its interaction with time and erosion. I think now it begs the question of, will this thing be legible as a human mark in another 40 or 50 years? And with that question in mind, in 2009 we arrived with a laser scanner to record point clouds, millions of points of data that accurately describe the physical position and composition of the work at that moment in time. This sorts of thing opens up our ability to view Double Negative as an index of many measures. Our itinerary is divided between work and interpretive sites, investigating diverse places and placeless areas that define the American West. Rather than dividing the itinerary by political nation-state boundaries, we see the territory existing within distinct ecological niches, primarily the Colorado Plateau, the Great Basin, and the Chihuahuan Desert. Our understanding of these territories is made real by our inhabitation of them and what we find out there. If we pay attention, and sometimes we must, the territory will tell us all sorts of things, intentional or not. Reading or listening to the stories we find in the landscape is as vital as tracking the threads of the stories themselves. Here we're listening to the stories of the Navajo and the Mescalero Apache that were force-marched to this internment camp in the late 1800s. Each fall, the semester sets out from Lubbock, Texas, for a 2-month journey, traveling about 6,000 miles over land. Our operation fits in 2 vans, one for gear, the other for people. Both are tightly packed. We make electricity from the sun with photovoltaic panels on the roof of one of the vans to power our mobile lab and stereo, super important ingredient. We track our location and route with the global positioning system. We attempt to make sense of our tools in the field and manage the collective memory of the expanding land arts archive. We build our own infrastructure. Over the years, the cook tent has evolved considerably, as that's our perspective. Drawing always helps to make sense of things. The cook tent is a shady place to prepare for evening seminars, to make work, and return to at the end of the day. We often think of it as our mobile bunker. Nice bunker reference. Attempting to shelter us from the elements. Those elements directly impact our work environment. The wind is always something. Sometimes the system fails and we lose that battle with the wind. This is always fun to return to, and we have more than once. Our kitchen is elemental. It's important to eat well in the field. We haul our own water, try to keep the utensils reasonably clean, the snack bin stocked. A few years back, inspired by the Institute of Contemporary Art at the University of Pennsylvania, we acquired some folding beer garden tables, much like we see in this fine country, for our meals. And they've made a profound difference on our meal conversation, on our dialogue, as well as the aspirations of our cooks. Yet we remain fans of curious lunch stops, from interstate leftovers to forlorn loading chutes to transfer station oases. Cycling through sites of wilderness and culture, we visit the legacy of Donald Judd in Marfa, Texas. And for us, the essential aspect of that legacy is institutional, in what he created in the Chinati and Judd foundations, making curatorial decisions to permanently locate artworks in physical settings. He created situations of deliberate and persistent fusing of art, architecture, and landscape. Our actions are fused to expanding efforts for maintaining our focus and shape for what is ahead. Hopefully everyone's tracking here, no panicking. This is a good piece of wilderness advice if you're wondering what's happening to you. One of the great things about taking people out into the landscape is bringing them to places like Chaco Canyon here and standing on top of a ridge, looking out over this view and seeing what seems like an apparently untouched, a landscape untouched by human activity, and kind of having this thought, and everybody has this first thought of, wow, this is cool. I'm the first person to ever stand here. And then we look down to our feet and see this line of rocks and realize that these stones have been, this is memory of a former dwelling or some former structure. The reality is that human activity has touched the entire planet, and the signs of this take many forms, particularly if we participate in the conversation about the Anthropocene. Coming to terms with the language of these traces and our relationship to them is an essential objective of the Land Arts program. These languages engage many cultures. Not all of them are human. We aren't the only creatures on the planet. The continuum of traces runs from ancient to the legacy of more contemporary occupation, including industrial production. It's essential to investigate what's beneath the surface, even the surface of your dashboard. Lurking around the edges of the frame, this vehicle here in the corner, perhaps many of you aren't familiar with it, it's the Border Patrol, and it's a truck that's stationed as a temporary camera station. So it's outfitted with cameras and sensors just parked on the side of a road not too far from the border. One of the places we visit is Chaco Canyon because of the shift in human settlement it registers in the American West. The many stories and how they are told is as interesting to us as the physical remains of the site. We are there to see how people occupied and built within the land. And since it is a national park, coming to terms with this highly regulated and managed space and this managed history is also part of our experience. Chaco demonstrates a concentration of resources and energy, a leap, to build on a scale previously not attempted in the region. The history of land art is ripe with concentrations of resources and attempts to use the sky to find our place in the world. Roden Crater by James Turrell is a naked eye observatory on the edge of the painted desert, and it remains a work in progress. We visit it as a construction site to learn of its ambition and how it is coming into being. This 850-foot-long entry tunnel burrowing into the crater is both a viewing and a projection chamber. As with much of Turrell's work, the light at the end of the tunnel is not a train, it's a sky. Turrell creates instruments that challenge the shape of the sky and allow us to see ourselves seeing, presenting us anew what we see every day. To help the shape of this, the range of our experience and the things that we are seeing and making, readings guide a regular frequency of seminars, usually around an evening campfire. And these conversations are tempered with other measures of time and space and a little bit of panic. That otherworldly gray surface in the center of this image is not a mirage. It's something we all should be concerned about. It's a capped pile of uranium tailings on the Navajo Nation. To help make visible the often unseen legacy of radioactivity in the American West, we visit the partially reclaimed Jackpile Mine at Laguna Pueblo. From the 1950s to the 1980s, this was the largest open-pit uranium mine in North America. Open pit and uranium mine should never be part of the same sentence, from my perspective. Our guide is the geologist and Laguna member Curtis Francisco, who helps us understand the magnitude of environmental challenges and how people continue to live in and within these challenges. And these are challenges with real effects. This is clearly a loaded landscape, and the signs are everywhere if we're willing to look. We follow such signs where they'll take us. Essential to land arts is the importance of inserting ourselves into the picture with distance and proximity. Ideally inserting ourselves through our own work, measuring our experience of place, persona, process, and memory. Memory is activated by places such as Wendover, Utah, which we visit because of its place in atomic history. And we're also there to work with the Center for Land Use Interpretation. Steve, you're out. The center maintains a base in Wendover of exhibition and support facilities. Within this complex landscape that contains the remnants of the largest Army air training base during World War II. Coolidge likes to refer to it as an active ruin, complete with all the attending human erosion. Traces of many forms of testing remain in this landscape, including an active attempt to resettle or to settle this post-military territory. Here, the group Simpark has been building an off-the-grid autonomous base for the center. Part energy, part aesthetic experiment, it is also all about operational details. This place remains an active civilian training ground. Here, the military tested and developed methods for deploying the fruits of the Manhattan Project. The architecture that remains, as always, is loaded with stories to be unpacked and digested and relayed to others. This seemingly empty territory of the Great Salt Lake Desert attracts things that like emptiness. That's another Coolidge quote. It's a highly industrialized landscape with installations like the evaporative mineral extraction. Traveling into this terrain, we learn that places are rarely ever truly empty. An essential aspect of our time in Wendover is getting out onto the flats to work and reflect. In this landscape, it's easy to become lost between the ground and the sky. To help us think about this problem, we have been joined in the past by Bill Fox, who has written about the breakdown of human cognition that occurs within isotropic spaces, spaces that are the same in all directions. He talks about the impossibility of doing things like walking a straight line in a place like this. And given my nature, I say, I can fix my gaze on that far point and prove him wrong. And then I turn around, and my footprints prove that I'm the one that's in error. And this sort of empirical feedback is central to land arts pedagogy. Such lessons make real the power of the horizon on our ability to navigate. Structures like the Bonneville Dike become visible as truly monumental marks in the land, 12 miles long and dead level. Land arts puts into perspective the large holes and long lines on the planet. Like the bathtub ring at Lake Mead, this bleached line on the lake, as a monumental drawing and an indicator of drought. It's important to read the line between nature and human construction not as opposition, but dialogue, even when there is conflict in that dialogue. For some, like the artist Nancy Holt, lines connect out from ourselves to celestial events in the sky. Our network of participants, architects, artists, writers, historians, connect outward as well across other units on campus, other institutions, and other parts of the world. Over the years, they have come to us from places such as the universities of Pennsylvania, Texas at Austin, Iowa, South Florida, California at Berkeley, Riverside and Irvine, New York University, Goldsmiths in London, Cranbrook, Rhode Island School of Design, Whitman College, Bard College, and Yale. From across North America, Australia, Chile, Spain, and this year we have participants coming from Belgium and Sweden. Speaking of networks and extensions, let's go on a little quick digression here that has grown out of our involvement with the center. In 2005, an idea appeared when Matt Coolidge took Steve Badgett and I out for a drive on a bombing range in Utah. And yes, it was technically an active bombing range, so I was only slightly worried. We went out there to look at these brine collection canals of the Intrepid Potash Company. And standing there, we thought it might be productive to consider building a craft, a salt boat, to occupy these curious trenches. They extend for miles through the desert. And with a bit of time and dialogue, the idea grew into the Great Salt Lake Exploration Platform, a modularly deployable craft to allow culture workers, artists, writers, historians to spend time on the Great Salt Lake and make work and not die in this particularly extreme territory. That last bit's not a joke. Our aspirational references range from Patagonia through the Pacific Northwest to outer space. Ciudad Abierta, Alexander Graham Bell, and Buckminster Fuller. The platform also needed a structural integrity to withstand the hazards of the lake. It's a lake known for tearing boats apart. So fabrication began in 2015 when materials, components, and Steve arrived in Lubbock. Moving through design, fabrication, we tested through assembly the primary framing of this 16-foot wide by 34-foot long platform as it began to stabilize in front of us. And as soon as the parts were made, we loaded up the transport trailer to bring them to Utah for field testing. Will this thing float? Hopefully you're getting a sense that this is an instrument. It's a vehicle for literally putting people out in this particular and underexplored territory. It's a hostile landscape. The primary impulse allows us to show up anywhere near the water, tote the parts to the edge, assemble the craft with minimal shore-based support. Although shore-based support can expand one's reach. We arrived at Spiral Jetty from the water last summer, quite striking. The central ethos of the project is to venture out into this highly under-examined land and waterscape. We're out in the middle of the lake and we find a berm with caterpillar with excavator tracks on it. pretty interesting. And to learn from what we find out there. 18-inch diameter suction dredge. They're dredging a trench through the bottom of the lake to convey brine in an open trench under the water. Whole other conversation about that, and also surviving in the process is really essential. And so the safety, we kind of think of this as almost an off-planet mission, right? There's no rescue, there's no 911. We are keenly interested in the platform's operational performance and how it focuses our experience beyond itself. This looking through or out or with this. Over the years, the land arts participant responses to their field experience has covered profoundly diverse ranges, while often stemming from common impulses, with variations and layers of meaning. The work always requires personal investment, material performance, embodied time, experimental craft, expansive process, primary experience, dynamic architecture, and active documentation in many, many forms. It is essential that we make the work legible to expansive public audiences, and this occurs through our interaction on campus and how we present the work to the world. Each field season culminates with an exhibition, requiring participants to synthesize and reconsider the work from the field, so it can be made legible to widening audiences. In the end, we have failed if this is just a great camping trip. How the work comes back, in Robert Smithson's terms, from sight to non-sight, is how we return to and help shape culture. Part of this return is advancing our long table dinners that grow to celebrate the exhibition with students, families, friends, and faculty. The table maxes out at 99 chairs. Participants carry their land arts experience long into the future. And so as we near the end of this journey today, let's return to the spiral jetty and the space between image, mediated experience, temporal afterglow, cycling again and again, to ponder that space between ground and sky, the receding horizon, what Rebecca Solnit calls the blue of distance. Even though Smithson said the future tends to be prehistoric, the response of the land arts participants is never one of closing down or retreating. Instead, outward momentum continues. We return to Bucky's reading of big patterns, opening the vast terrain of how human action and inquiry have made land into landscape. Thank you all for your part in this journey. Shazam.